Yeah, that's what I got.
I'd like to call the Tuesday, June the 9th, 2020 board work session of the Harnett County Board of Commissioners into session. If you would join me for a pledge and an invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you pray with me? Merciful Father, for the day you provided, we praise your name, Lord. We thank you, Father, that we can come in a free land. Father, we see what's going on on our television and in the news media about the violence and the pillaging and the looting, Father, but we're better people than that. We're a nation founded on Christian values. We're a nation, Father, that believes in the rule of law. Help us, Father, to not lose sight of what you have provided for us. Father, give us wisdom from on high this day as we conduct the affairs of Harnett County. Help us to be prudent in our decisions. Help us to be caring and carefully consider all things that are presented to us today. And when all is said and done, may it be found pleasing in your sight. For in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen. Our first order of business is general budget discussion. Paula Stewart is going to conduct with the Sheriff's office positions and salary and grade table changes.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Penny. If you recall, last meeting we discussed the sheriff's detention officers and the deputies that I had proposed to freeze in this coming budget fiscal year 2021. So there's 2 deputy sheriffs, 2 detention officers, and the total, and then there was also 1 administrative assistant. So totally, that's $262,324 that was needed to help balance the budget, and that's why we recommended freezing these positions at that time. I have reached out to the sheriff and gave him some options to consider. I've asked him for any input he has to help us with this situation. So, my recommendation today is to leave the budget alone and just let us come back, meet with the sheriff, discuss it with him in more detail, find out what he needs and what his needs are, because we don't want to impact the community, but if he's okay with some of the other things he's got, if we could just wait and do it after July 1st, that would be my recommendation. But it's up to the board if you want to discuss or ask any other questions.
So what we are saying is, we're not saying no. We're saying, not being that we've got this budget ready to go, that we would address it right after the first day of July, our, I guess, next meeting, or...
Correct. You can do it July 6th. You can do it, that'd be the first meeting after the new budget year.
Okay.
And if you want us to come back with a recommendation for the June 30th work session, we can do that as well.
Aren't we meeting?
We are, but we've got to talk to him some more before we make a recommendation back to the board.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
to find out what the real needs are.
Okay.
So that would be my recommendation, is not to make changes, because we already have all the documents ready to go. And so again, we're not saying no, we're just saying let's talk about it some more and see where we. So basically, the number I gave you, we'd have to probably allocate that from fund balance in July.
How much is that?
The total for all 5 positions is $262,324, and that's an estimate. That's with benefits. That's the positions plus the benefits. And another option, just for you to be considering, we could delay the hire of them. Like, he may need it, but if we could delay it a few months, that would save some of that. If we don't just do it immediately in July. If he could wait and hire, staggered hire, maybe one now or one, in a few months. Just be thinking of options that you have, and we'll talk to him today and get more today and get some more information from him.
Okay, well, I see the sheriff sitting back there, because obviously right now you've got your SROs that's not being SROs, so I guess they're doing deputy duty. So I guess we could, if we, again, not put off, well, I guess we are putting off hiring. Because when school starts back, your detention officers, they got to go back to the school. So if we phased them in, of course, that's up to the sheriff and the county manager to work it out. So you hear what our thought process is.
Can I say something?
Sure.
And you're right, and I'm glad we're going to have this meeting this whenever. But one thing we need to look at is I have had those school resource officers in the neighborhoods patrolling various areas. But now we got to remember, when school starts back, I'm going to lose 16 positions that are going to go back into the schools. So that's one thing we need to look at. I'm not opposed to what Paula's saying, and I understand. I want to work with you as much as we can, but we also got to remember that we have got to make sure, especially with the civil unrest like we have today, which I got to say, we've been blessed here in Harnett County. We got good folks here in Harnett County so far, but we need to make sure we protect the citizens of this county. And losing those 16 is going to hurt as far as being visible in the communities out there. So whatever we can do and as quickly as we can get it done, we need to look at. But like I said, we're going to lose 16 of them when school starts back, whenever that starts back. But anyway, that's things we can discuss in this meeting.
Well, another thing I want to point out, we've been working on a budget now for months. We got 6 days with budget that's prepared. If we go in and amend now, we start not all over again, but it's not as simple as just adding $262,320, because you've got to, it takes some time. So what we're saying as commissioners, the county manager is saying is, we're not saying no, we're just saying, can you give us 2 more weeks before we implement what you're asking for? That's what we're, I think, if I'm saying anything wrong now, y'all speak up. That's what we're saying. We're just asking you to wait 2 weeks. We're not saying no forever.
And it's like, and Paula and I have had this conversation, these positions have been empty, some of them, for a while. But one thing was raising the detention staff, and I've got enough people to fill the positions we got empty, but I can wait on that a couple of weeks till we can get into the next budget year. That's the first time we've been full since even when Sheriff Rollins was here. And I've got enough people that in the application process that's been approved to fill them. And the patrol, I've really got enough to fill those whenever it comes time that I can. So wait until the budget for next year or whatever, I'll work with you any way we can, but we can't afford to leave them vacant for a long period of time, losing those other ones as well. But that's something we can, I'm sure we can work this out.
All right, thank you, Sheriff.
Just don't take it from the rest of my budget.
That don't help. $1 million.
Yeah, I'll save that for the next meeting.
Okay, next on the agenda is discuss revised project ordinance in the
No, we
GM.
gotta go back to the salary and grade table change.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Good morning. This is just something that's in the salary and grade table, which is in the budget ordinance. Just wanted to point this out. I'll start by saying there's no additional funding required, so it's level. But it deals with the Harnett Regional Water. They have a certification pay plan where employees in some of their positions earn certifications with treatment plant operations, that sort of thing. And at the moment, those positions, typically they have 4 certification levels, and they get a 5% increase for each of those certifications that they achieve. So one problem is that employees who have been with the county a long time, they've earned multiple certifications, they've been maybe promoted to different positions, they're getting close to the maximum of their grade. Now this, when we implemented the new pay plan, we understood that if you're providing increases throughout an employee's career, they're going to start coming close to that maximum, but we are starting to see it with some of these employees first. So talked to Steve Ward, we looked at what can we do in terms of a solution, and the solution we decided upon was to break each of these 7 positions out into multiple grades. They currently get, again, the 5% increase for completing a certification. There's also a 5% difference between the grades, so it works pretty well. And we've also decided to break out some of those positions. For instance, a utility system technician, they have collections and distribution. So we wanted to break that out to make it a little more clear when you're posting for a job, whether it's a collection systems technician or a distribution systems technician, because there are different certifications involved for each of those. Instead of, basically at the moment you've got a utility systems technician at a grade 15, this would break them out into one, a collection systems technician. They would start as a trainee or level 1 at a grade 15. Then if they became a level 2, they go to grade 16. The next certification, grade 17, next one, grade 18. Again, it doesn't change anything that's currently being done. It just separates that into multiple grades, which is what we do for code enforcement officers, as well as paramedics. So it's no really different than anything we're doing. There's no additional cost increase there. Just wanted to make you aware of it because it will look different in your budget ordinance. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is to discuss the revised project ordinance and GMP for Irwin Elementary School project.
As you see in your budget packet, the Harnett County Schools submitted the latest Irwin Elementary School numbers that they got. Their construction manager at risk is Metcon, and you can see that the new GMP is $25,291,931. And that brings the total cost, when you add back in the pre-construction fees, the existing Irwin demolition, administrative costs, the furniture, fixtures and equipment, technology, it brings the cost of the Irwin school for 690 students to $29,110,123. And we are revising our project ordinance for the Irwin Elementary project. Initially, we had come to you at the price that the school system had given us at $23,481,723. So what we're amending it to now, and it's also in your budget packet, it'll be $27,500,000. So there is a difference between the actual probable construction cost and the amount that we're going out to on the bond market for, but we still feel like we'll get a premium on these bonds. We could use local money for some of it. We just kind of hate to borrow the whole $29,110,000 when we're not. It still says probable cost. It's not the firm number is the GMP number at the top, the $25,291,931. That's the guaranteed maximum price for Irwin Elementary construction. But again, we have all these other costs. So I just wanted the board to let you know, if that's okay with you, that's what Kimberly and I have presented on the new budget, on the new project ordinance, is to go out on the bond market for $27,500,000.
Jim, the other thing, do we know what these other costs? It says that the cost does not include project bonding, cost of insurance, attorney fees, and financial advisors. Do we know what that cost is?
No. This is Kimberly Honeycutt. No, sir, we do not. Right now, we're getting estimates. A lot of those costs will depend on percentages of what this is. So, but normally, we would take most of that out of contingency. There would be enough play in this budget. But just to add to what the county manager has stated, going out for 27.5 right now, we are in a premium environment, and that we are anticipating the possibility of getting more than the 27. But right now, our debt affordability analysis, all of our percentages have been run on us borrowing $27.5 million and paying that back. And so for us to stay within our percentages to maintain our agency ratings, we are recommending the 27.5.
And Commissioners, the revised ordinance was in your package, and it's been put online in a revised agenda package that did not go out in the original package.
So can I ask a question? Commissioner McCoy?
Be careful.
So if we're going out for 27 million for the vote with the bonds, and you said the other is gonna come from fund balance?
No,
Did you
ma'am.
say that?
No, it'll come from, well, like Kimberly said, right now it's in the contingency budget. It could come from, if we do not get a premium on our bonds, we would have to pay for it out of local money. But we don't foresee that happening, and we feel like the bond market's in a premium, and we feel like we will be able to cover this.
Okay.
So it would, that's just if the bond market is not selling at a premium, we'd have to take it out of fund balance.
Yeah.
But that's why we've tried very hard to stay on schedule and go to the bond market on June 30th. So we made sure before we looked at, pushing your approval of the resolution to the 15th, that we could still issue the official statements. We've checked with the local government commission, so we're still on schedule to go to the bond market on June 30th. And right now, we're still.
Well, given the climate in this world, the economy and all, we gotta stay on budget.
Yes, ma'am, and may I add too, even so with the rating agencies, you know, we've had our rating agency calls, excuse me, and the policies and procedures that you as the board adopt to maintain our fund balance at a certain amount, debt will not exceed our assessed value or our revenues. Those percentages were put in place, and so that is the document that we issue debt by, and that's why when we run these numbers, we know exactly the max that we can go out for and afford, because that will continue to impact our rating agency. And you know, and for those that may not understand or realize, the rating agencies, when they give us our rating review, that's the equivalent of like your credit score, and that is what enables us to borrow money at a lower interest rate.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just Commissioner Springle. Kimberly, what we're doing, I know we're including furnishings in this $27.5 million, but we're not going to finance that. We're not financing anything. I think what we had done in the past is we had eliminated furnishings and equipment and stuff like that because it didn't make any sense to borrow.
Yeah, computers and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, traditionally, because of the size of the school, the number of items that are needed, that it's physically impossible for us to turn around and to fund that through our capital funding. We would have to come up with that out of our fund balance. So normally, yes, we do add these into the project and finance it, but what we find historically in the end is that we get our sales tax back, and that is a significant savings. Then our interest, which right now is not the best in the world, but in the past, the interest has been a huge portion of that to help defray that. But then what happens is we have additional funds left over that we have historically given back to the school system. And all of that is part of a plan. And again, even though it's included on this and it looks like we are financing it, in the end, we really don't.
Okay.
We have money left over.
Right.
But we need this cost. And may I point out too, this is the first time we've done a form like this. We normally bring you a project ordinance, and then any changes to that ordinance we do through a budget amendment. And because we had originally started out, you approved the original project ordinance in June of last year. So basically a year ago, you approved this Irwin project. So we felt it very necessary, and you'll notice there's an addition of a paragraph below at the bottom of the document that identifies the reason we are doing it like this is to identify that we are now going to issue 27.5, whereas originally in your documents a year ago. So anyone trying to follow those documents, they would be looking for the 23, and this will kind of give them a segue into that. So.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next, we've got Brian Haney back up. Present proposed changes to the personnel ordinance.
Okay, and you've got, should have these in your packet as well, but the current performance pay plan went into effect July 1st of 2017. That was almost 3 years ago. And over the last years, a number of issues have come up that needed to be addressed. So we brought the original pay plan committee back together that helped work on developing that pay plan change to discuss these issues and come up with some recommendations. Just as a recap, the previous 3-5 pay plan provided fairly substantial increases after an employee's 3rd or 5th year with the county, but then those employees received nothing else, typically throughout the rest of their career. So we were brought together 3 years ago to come up with a plan that would help do something for employees beyond that. So what we came up with was the performance pay plan, which actually provides a cost savings over the 3-5 plan for the county, but also provides employees with increases throughout their careers with the county. This year, since it's 3 years after that went into effect, you should be seeing the last 3-year increases being provided June 30th of this year, and then the last 5-year increases will be obviously provided 2 years from now. So any employee hired or promoted or who reaches job rate, which is where the 5-year increase took them after July 1st of 2017 is automatically enrolled in the performance pay plan. At the beginning of this calendar year, there were still 125 employees that were in the 3-5 plan. Obviously, that number has gone down over the last 6 months. So I wanted to go over with you the changes that we are proposing And we're asking that if you're amenable to these changes, be put on your June 15th agenda to become effective July 1st of 2020. So going through the first section, Article 3, the pay plan, going down to Section 6 on the second page of that. This one addition that was proposed in this year's budget was to add part-time employees into the performance pay plan. Historically, part-time employees, they're hired, they come in at a salary, and typically they stay at that salary, but we've got part-time employees who've been here for a substantial number of years and have never received any kind of increase. What this would do is bring part-time employees into that system at a more simplistic evaluation form for those employees, but it would allow them to begin receiving those increases as well based on their performance reviews. And please, if you have any questions throughout, let me know.
I got one question.
Yes.
Are they part-time by choice that they do not want to work full-time, or just a position is a part-time position?
The position is a part-time position. Typically, you have a certain number of full-time positions in the county, but then there's also benefits to having part-time employees in certain positions due to, the benefit situation and different things. So the county, particularly I think in your emergency services department and some others, they do hire part-time employees. But it's, certainly an employee, they apply for one or the other based on their preference of a part-time or full-time position. But the positions with the county are automatically part-time.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Commissioner McCoy, how long does, normally how long does, do a part-time position like?
Well, there are different types of part-time positions. There are seasonal part-time positions where people will work a certain time of the year. For instance, with the Boone Trail Community Center and Library, they're coming in, they're working during summer camp, and they come back, so they may come back the next summer or they may not. You've got temporary part-time, which would work for a set period of time, which is, your election workers, they're working through the election, and then they leave, and they may come back the next year or not. And then you've got permanent part-time that, they're in a part-time position that continues. Some people have been here for, 20 years in a part-time position. It just may be the type of work they want.
I got another question then, because I have not seen no election workers as part-time position that come back seasonal.
They don't necessarily come back seasonal. You would apply to be an election worker the following year, but you'll see in here election workers are not included in this
Okay.
part-time pay plan.
There you go.
I will talk about the eligibility in a moment.
Okay.
Permanent part-time, do they have any benefits like hospitalization or anything, or not? Or yet some do, some don't, or?
No.
Okay,
No.
I just want to make sure.
The only benefit that they really are going to receive would be this performance increase. And it doesn't give them any right to any additional benefits that they would not otherwise be entitled to.
All right, thank you.
Let me ask one more question. I'm sorry, Brian.
Yes, ma'am.
But a part-time worker, if you use them from season to season and their job becomes permanent, are they first to be in line for that?
I'm not exactly sure how that works. It may differ between the departments how they hire for that. I don't know if they bring people back automatically or if they go through a process.
It's not automatic.
It's not automatic.
We still go through the same hiring process even if the position becomes full-time. They have to apply just like anybody else.
You frequently in emergency services in particular will see employees that apply for full-time, that may be part-time, and they decide they want to apply for full-time positions.
Well,
And
maybe that's another discussion for another time, so I'm moving on.
I'll get to eligibility in a moment. The next change you'll see is that any increase related to this pay plan will be effective at the start of the pay period immediately following an employee's anniversary date. Currently, an employee will receive an increase if they earn it through their performance evaluation at the start of their new anniversary year with the county. With the transition to Munis, the software wants, or the program wants to provide it. If you give an increase, let's say the pay period is from the 16th of the month to the 15th of the following month, it automatically wants to give someone an increase for the full pay period, even if their anniversary date may have been, say, the 27th of the month. And that requires a great deal of work for payroll to go back and adjust to a partial calculation for every employee who gets an increase. So this kind of simplifies that system, and instead of getting it on their anniversary date, they will get that effective the following pay period, which is typically less than a month away. So not a substantial change, but it does help make that an easier process. Also, at the bottom of that paragraph, if an employee changes from full-time to part-time or from part-time to full-time status, the date of the change in employment status will be used to establish their anniversary date going forward.
What date?
That would be the date that they become a full-time employee. That establishes a new anniversary date on which their increase date will be based. We did remove at the bottom of that page a provision that was here when the pay plan started, that full-time employees who have been with the county 26 or more years of total employment when the pay plan went into effect in 2017 would get an additional percentage increase for the first 3 years of the pay plan. And we're removing that simply because the 3-year period expires effective June 30th of this year. So going forward, all employees will get the same increase if they earn an increase. And this was due to the fact, again, that I mentioned the previous pay plan did not provide increases after the 5th year of employment with the county. So this was a way to do something, somewhat, a little bit more for those employees who've been with the county for a long time. On the next page, we talk about eligibility. The second paragraph, which is in red, part-time employees are eligible for the performance pay plan effective July 1st of 2020 based on their annual performance reviews. To be eligible for the pay plan, part-time employees must maintain uninterrupted employment with the county for consecutive years, meaning they cannot be, terminated and then come back to, they can receive it once they become uninterrupted employees with the county. Under consecutive years. And then election workers, interns, and any other part-time employee who must be rehired each year are not eligible for the performance pay plan. Additional guidelines for eligibility are that employees in the work against status will not be eligible for the pay plan until they complete the work against status or meet all qualifications of the position. This is a status typically an employee who's not, they may be brought in at a work against where they are brought in at a work against, for instance, social worker 2, but they have the qualifications for a 1, so they're brought in at a 2, but work against, and then after a certain period of time when they meet the qualifications, they become a social worker 2. So until they reach that position, they will not be eligible for this increase.
Question, Brian.
Yes.
First paragraph you read, part-time employees are eligible for the performance pay plan, must maintain uninterrupted employment. All right, you've got an employee that worked this section and in this section, then you said they go back and you go through the hiring process each time. What if they're not hired and they miss a section? They miss a year and then they come back.
If they miss a year, that would restart when they come back. You have to be because for a lot of part-time employees, they're here, they may not work. They work 20 hours a week, they may work, a season, but they're still here. And then they're still employees, but they're not technically working. So if that would be uninterrupted, they come back the next year in that position. Some departments do it that way. Mm-hmm. But for the ones where it is interrupted employment, they would not, let's say they come in 2017 and then they terminate and then they are rehired in 2018. Because that's interrupted employment, their new anniversary date would start when they come back in 18, and if they were uninterrupted the following year, they would receive that increase in 19. But for the interrupted employees, they would not receive that until they are in the county for uninterrupted consecutive years.
But you're basing it on the position itself is designated whether it's part-time or full-time. So we're not talking about individual, we're talking about the position, right?
Yes, we're talking about the classification of the position.
Right.
And that some departments just do it differently with their employees, and we talked it through the committee to try to understand all the different departments' needs. We vetted this for almost 6 months through the committee, and then also presented it to all department heads to make sure that does this make sense for the way you operate, and we got no negative feedback on that. So the work against status, the next bullet, to receive an earned increase, an employee must work at least 6 months during an annual evaluation period. Now that is related to the fact that you may have employees who are out for a large portion of the year. Since this pay plan is tied to a performance evaluation, you have to be able to evaluate the employee effectively. And in the committee, we looked at some different options, and they felt that half a year was was required to be able to effectively evaluate that employee. And some of these are very technical and kind of tedious, but that's, unfortunately, that's just how the personnel ordinance has to take those things into account. The next bullet on the next page, an employee who is promoted during an evaluation period must have been in the new position for at least 6 months on their anniversary date to receive that increase calculated on their new salary after the promotion. If they've been in that position for less than 6 months, it'll be calculated on their previous salary. Again, just because you won't have time to effectively evaluate that person in that position. Next, any employee who is demoted during evaluation period, if they receive an increase, will receive it based on the salary following the demotion. The next paragraph I want to touch on is this is an issue that we have encountered where, at the start of the pay plan, the goal was, and Kimberly can vouch for this, was to get people out of the 3-5 plan into this new performance pay plan as quickly as we could. So we didn't have to worry with those calculations and get everybody on a consistent pattern moving forward. At the start of that plan, we certainly didn't know what the percentage of increases were going to be every year. So we really didn't know how this would affect people versus the 3-5 pay plan. What we have found over the last several years are there may be some employees due to they were promoted or they got a certification, that kind of thing, that could have brought an employee to a level in the 3-5 where they were very close to that 5-year job rate. So after 3 years in that plan, an employee moves halfway between their current salary and job rate, and then after the 5th year, they move all the way to that job rate and would then enter the performance pay plan. Some employees were so close to that level that they may, after 3 years, got an increase of a few $100s. And then after they had to wait 3 years to get that minor increase, and then wait another 2 years to get the same increase, and then start earning that annual increase. So some employees have kind of been trapped in that 3-5 at an increase level and span that was substantially less than they would have been in were they originally put in the performance pay plan. So in looking back at some of those situations, the thought with the performance pay plan was not to negatively impact employees by keeping them in the 3-5. So this would give, if the county manager determines that an employee was at a point in the 3-5 pay plan as of July 1st of 2017 where the employee would have earned more by entering the performance pay plan when it was incepted, the county manager may, upon the availability of funding, adjust the employee's pay to the salary they would have earned if they had entered the performance pay plan on July 1st, 2017. The adjusted salary will be in effect upon approval by the county manager. However, the affected employee will not receive retroactive salary increases for earned increases they did not receive. Because technically they had been in the 3-5 plan by the personnel ordinance, so there's going to be no retroactive. But we're currently conducting an analysis, Human Resources is, to determine how many employees are in the situation where they would have made more by being in the performance pay plan, and what that looks like. The idea would be to, once and for all, get them out of the 3-5 plan, put them where they would have been were they in the performance pay plan going forward. But obviously that's contingent upon funding within the departments. Once we get the analysis, we do not believe this is very many employees at all. I think this has come up, just probably a few dozen times, but we will know that once HR completes that analysis. But if it is something that can be done within the current budget, then that would be something that we would allow the county manager to do, assuming that it would be done for all employees at one time, not one here, one there, to make it inconsistent. And that, again, will move additional employees out of the 3-5 plan and kind of put them at a place where they would not be penalized for having to remain in that 3-5 plan. Under section 7 below that page, we just changed the definition of a trainee to a work against status. And looking at that, we don't actually use the status of a trainee anymore. That is technically work against, so just cleaning that up.
Explain work against. This is a new term for me, a work against status.
Oh, it is.
Work against status is basically if an employee is hired and they do not meet all of the established qualifications for that department or for that position, they can be put in a work against status whereby they have to complete a certain amount of experience or training. They may be 6 months shy of the experience they need to be in that position. Then they will work for 6 months, as it says here. The supervisor will confirm that they're ready to move into that level with the county manager's authority, and then they can begin that position.
And it's really came from the state. the DHHS department, in health department and social services where that originated. But then other departments have started doing it, so that's why we decided to call it, instead of trainee, it's called work against. To be
Work
consistent.
against, that's,
You're in a
That's it.
position working against another position, or working against that position.
And the pay, if I could add, Commissioner Miller, the pay is actually below the stated
Mhm.
grade.
I was just trying to figure out the name work against status, just
And it's
make a whole lot of
probably
sense.
stated, it's probably stated, that's a statism, is that a word? That's a statism thing.
So the idea is they're working against the position, and that's why they're not in the performance pay plan, because when they get to that level, when they complete work against, they go to the position, so they get an increase there. So it, not to give multiple during the process. Any other questions on that section?
So once they go to that, will it be put in the,
Yes, ma'am. Once they complete work against status and go to the minimum salary for that position, they will become part of that performance pay plan. The same thing applies to sworn law enforcement officers in the tier program. And that's just for deputies. They can come in as a tier 1 or a tier 2. I believe it's after a year and a half, they get an increase to go to a tier 2. Another year and a half, they get an increase to go to a tier 3, and then they would start the performance pay plan. And that's how the sheriff's office has been doing it. We just wanted to make sure that's written in the ordinance.
this seems like a lot of changes to me. Because I don't recall hearing all of this stuff here.
A lot of these changes for the things that this has been in the ordinance, but these are things that have been done. We just want to make sure that they are written in the ordinance so it's clear. So there can't be questions asked in the future. You can look at the ordinance and it's there. But most of these things, like what I've just talked about, that's been in practice in the county. It just hasn't been technically written in the ordinance. We're trying to clean up a lot of these things.
Well, that makes it more clear.
Well,
Well,
it could be a situation, where you've got somebody that doesn't necessarily qualify for the position, but they can work toward qualifying for it. That's what you're really saying, right?
Correct.
Because that way you get somebody hired for the position, then you're getting, in to where, like for example, say somebody that's doing inspections, they have to be at a certain level and doing inspections, but they could come in at a lower level to qualify for that level that they need to be.
They could work under probationary.
That's right.
Yeah,
Which is what that is, really.
that's right.
Yes, and at the end of that period that's established, the supervisor and the department head and the county manager would decide have they met that or not. You can
Right.
extend that period or terminate or whatever is reasonable. But yes, and particularly in your positions that are difficult to fill, like your code enforcement officers, that's a big plus.
Yeah.
Probation is a much better word.
That's a separate thing. We'll talk about that in a minute.
In the probation period, a simpler word to use.
The person don't even have to be qualified to be hired. That's what, to me, it really doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, it does if they are working toward qualifying for it, and I guess the question would be, once they reach that point, then it'd be up to the county manager to determine in the department head that this person has reached that point where they have qualified for the job.
And these are typically hard to fill positions. It's not just your run-of-the-mill people.
Right.
These are hard to find, like social workers and those kind of things. You typically harder to recruit for, and that's why it got created in the first place. So we don't have them. There's not a lot of them. There's just a handful. So
But it's not, I think there's nothing wrong with hiring a person and training a person. But I have a problem with hiring people that are not qualified to do the job. And then you're gonna hire someone, that means you can hire Joe Blow out down the street. And
But
then
you-
bring
but
him
you
in.
can't.
Well, there are still a lot of
You can't.
rules that govern the hiring process beyond that. This is just saying if you
Okay.
end up in a situation where
All
that's
right.
the case and you
Okay.
don't have qualified.
I'm just saying, to me, it doesn't make much sense to me, but.
And if I may add one more thing, everybody that gets hired and work against doesn't always get that position. They don't always meet the criteria to become that position. Just because you're hired as a work against it's not just an automatic, you're gonna get the job. If you don't go to school and get the training, if you don't finish your degree, if you don't do certain things, you won't get there.
Well, there are criteria for you to get to that job.
Yes.
And it's laid out, it's spelled out from the day they're hired,
Yes.
what they have to do to be.
So they come in at a rate below the minimum for the position, and then it says in the ordinance, an employee will be considered to be a work against status and continue at this pay rate until the supervisor or department head certifies and the county manager approves that the employee is qualified to assume the full duties and responsibilities of their new position.
Right, I got a question. This Commissioner Johnson, if the person doesn't meet the criteria when they get to that point, are they allowed another chance to work against that position?
I believe practice, and Kimberly and Polly, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, is that, certainly they can be terminated. However, the work against period may also be extended if that is agreed upon by the parties involved.
So would they fill that position even though they weren't qualified, or it would just stay vacant?
You would try to fill it with somebody else that is qualified, but again, it came from the state, and so we're going by what the state's practice is, and that's again how it started. So when the state, actually, they have a system, we have to submit a form to them, and it's called a PD 118, and the state has to review it, and they have to, it's not our call if that person's qualified or not, it's the state's call. So the state DHHS reviews those people, and if they think that person looks qualified enough to take this work against, they approve it, and then we approve it. And I don't approve anything until I get that form back from the state saying they've approved it. So we don't initiate it, we don't ever initiate a work against it, it's more or less the state initiates it.
An application, their resume, everything is sent to the state, and the state determines that, and based on what we've seen in the past, when the state comes back, there's several tiers, several levels. So if you have someone who is presumably a grade 18, that's the position they're going into. They're normally brought in like a 16 or a 17, and they have to work so many months. I've seen it from 6 months to a year to go up to a 17, and then another 6 or 18 months. So there's steps along the way where they are reviewed, their performance, and if they're not met, I'm assuming that they are terminated or.
I understand that better, because it sounds like a probationary period, you're going through that.
And then once they become permanent, then our probationary period kicks in. They have to perform satisfactory. So it's a long vetting process.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on Article 3? The next 3 are much shorter. Next is Article 4, Section 8, probationary period of employment. The change here is full-time employees serving a probationary period following a promotion shall not be prohibited from using any previously accrued leave during the probationary period. Basically, the ordinance lays out that if you are in a probationary period, you're not allowed to use any leave that you've accrued until you complete that probationary period. However, a lot of the reason for that is, when you start out, you don't have leave. And you're earning it and trying to build up that leave so you do have it. But if you are a current employee with the county who has been promoted, this would allow you to be able to use leave, sick leave, vacation during that probationary period. Next is Article 5, Section 12, performance evaluations. A lot of this is cleaning this section up based on the current evaluation system, but in the last paragraph, we wanted to stress how performance evaluation should be done in a timely manner. And I'll just read that paragraph. Performance evaluation should be completed in a timely manner with any resulting salary increases submitted via the personnel action process as soon as possible following the employee's anniversary date. In no situation should a performance evaluation be completed or resulting salary increase be submitted more than 6 months after an employee's corresponding anniversary date unless the employee is not present to be reviewed. The timely completion of the performance evaluations and submittal of salary increases is the responsibility of an evaluated employee supervisor and ultimately of the department head. Failure to complete performance evaluations and submit resulting salary increases in a timely manner should be reflected in the performance evaluation of the supervisor completing the evaluation and the department head. This just makes that clear, that expectation. We have had some situations where we were looking back in the previous software that we had, HTE, and an employee who may have been eligible, that increase was not submitted and completed. So we've had to go back and make that adjustment. We don't want to do that going forward. We're making the software transition. We want this to be, we feel like we've got it caught up at this point, and in the future, the responsibilities on the supervisor and the department head to make sure that those are submitted on time. And then finally, Article 6, Section 3, vacation leave. This section addresses the use of vacation leave for probationary employees, and again, similar to the previous section, it allows for employees serving a probationary period following a promotion to use any previously accrued vacation leave during the probationary period with the approval of the appropriate supervisor, department head, or county manager. And those are the proposed changes. Any questions?
Seeing no movement, and we've asked you a lot of questions, I assume we've asked the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And if everybody's amenable, we will put it on the next agenda for vote. I think, is it listed in consent agenda or?
It currently is.
Currently is. So if you would rather have that as a discussion item, that's
You've
up
got
to
a
you.
draft agenda in front of you if you want to change things.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll be up one more time.
Actually, we will have to list it separate because it's an ordinance.
Okay.
I mean, sorry, guys. I didn't think about that.
Next is property and liability insurance bid discussion.
This is Paula Stewart again, so I haven't been saying who I am. I wanted to give you a timeline on the property and liability insurance carrier discussion. We started in January of this year. We engaged McNeary Consulting Services to handle a competitive bid process for our property and liability insurance. It's a very complicated animal when you're a government this size with so many assets, and there's just so much liability that we have, so we felt good about putting it out for bid. We reviewed our previous coverage and we had questions about the limits, and we wanted to bring in an impartial third party to solicit the proposals and help us conduct the analysis of the bidders. So McNeary recommended engaging 2 or 3 brokers who would submit proposals from different insurance carriers. And so the 3 brokers that we submitted that McNeary used were Surrey Insurance, who's our current carrier, the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners Risk Pool, who are not technically a broker, but they do offer these services, and then Snipes Insurance, who was a local broker who had the county's insurance in the past. So we reviewed our current policies. We engaged McNeary engaged the brokers regarding the preferences for the market assignment, that we prepared the specs together, and then on March 3rd, McNeary released the specification to the brokers, and they gave the brokers till March 5th to submit proposals. So on May 5th, we received the proposals from all 3 of those brokers. Surrey came in with several proposals with Travelers, AIG, and Safety National. They also came in with Liberty Mutual, Travelers, and Safety National. So some of them, you put some of the different insurance coverage to different carriers. So one carrier may not handle all of it. Like Travelers may not handle something that Safety National handles. So they came in with and talked to several different insurance carriers and came up with a recommendation for all of our coverage. Ours is so complicated. The risk pool came back with a proposal, and so did Snipes Insurance. So between May and June, a group of our internal stakeholders, it was our office, legal, HR, and finance, we held several meetings to discuss the bids in detail. We asked additional questions, we conducted due diligence, and 2 of the proposals, I think they came out with 5, was it 5 total? I think it's 5 or 6 proposals that different carriers submitted different options. So 2 proposals stood out to us. One was the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners Risk Pool, and then a combination of 2 Surrey proposals. So the lowest was thrown out as well. The lowest was thrown out because they would not cover some of our properties for flood insurance. We had many, many discussions on flood insurance, especially down Shady Grove Road where our wastewater treatment plant is. There's just some areas that these people wouldn't cover. So that was a big deal for utilities. We brought in Steve Ward to help us with his buildings and things like that. Basically, these 2 proposals, it was so close. There's less than $2,000 difference in the proposals for those 2 carriers. So I'm here today to recommend awarding the bid to the risk pool. We used to be on the risk pool. I'm not sure if Kimberly knows the dates, but we were on the risk pool years ago. And then we've been with Surrey for years, and I don't know how long we've been with Surrey, but we've been there for a while. So, I feel like there were minor pluses and minuses to each provider, and this was a very hard decision. When we met, in fact, on Friday, and I still couldn't decide. So ultimately, it was my decision to bring a recommendation to y'all. but it was just so close. Like, there's just so many pros for Surrey and then pros for the risk pool. So we went back and forth, and we didn't ever take a vote. I kept telling them we were gonna take a vote, but we never did. So the reason behind part of my recommendation to you is, all of you know the value of the Association of County Commissioners. Their property and liability risk pool was created in 1986, so it's been here a very long time. Their only focus is the counties. They don't provide insurance to anybody else, just to their county providers. There's 70 out of 100 counties in North Carolina that are currently with the risk pool for property and liability and or workers' comp. And then some of the counties have all their insurance with the risk pool. They're governed by a board of trustees comprised of county commissioners and county management staff. So again, their primary focus is the counties and making sure the counties have what they need. That's why they were created. Back in 1986, they were created because the insurance had gotten so expensive that counties couldn't afford it, and they weren't covering the things that counties need covered. So that's why it was initiated in the beginning. They also provide proactive risk management and loss control activities, including an extensive training program designed specifically for county governments. And we feel like that's going to be key to this process, because we haven't, not that Surrey doesn't offer it, but we haven't been using the services they provide, so we don't really know if the services Surrey provides are as good as or better. We don't know. So we think that actively engaging this training program will assist the county in reducing our claims going forward. We just need to train our people better on how to handle equipment, how to drive safely, just some of the basic things we feel like we need to use the association for. They also have specific programs designed for law enforcement, and most of our claims on a lot of our things is law enforcement, damage to property, wrecks, those kind of things. So we feel like that these training programs for law enforcement are going to be very beneficial to us. I would like to recommend just an initial one-year contract, not a multi-year, because we don't know how it's going to go. We haven't been with the association in a number of years, so we're not sure. Again, it's a gamble, but the price difference was so low, the detailed information was so close. We would have to stay with Safety National for our excess workers' compensation and employers' liability, because several of the companies didn't quote that. Association doesn't provide it, Snipes didn't provide it. Some companies don't cover that excess workers' comp, so we would have to stay with Safety National for that, but we felt okay with that. And then also, I think one of the sheriff's some equipment he has is not covered through the association. We'd have to find another provider, but again, it's minimal cost. So just, I want to get your thoughts on this, and then also tell you that we're also planning to go out with an RFP. We're going to do it in-house this time for our workers' comp in the coming year, to be effective July 1st next year. So we feel like it's good to keep all of our brokers in check almost by going out for bid every so many years. We had wanted to do workers' comp and property and liability at once, but we agreed it would make more sense to do one now and one later, see how this goes, and then go to the next thing. Also, the risk pool offers discounts. If we stay with them and we like their coverage, then they provide discounts if you participate in both risk pools. And I just want to read, the NCACC vision statement is empowering 100 counties to work together for the betterment of one state. So again, I just thought we should try them in the risk pool, and I've got several managers that I deal with on a weekly basis practically, and they've been with the risk pool for years, and they have had nothing but good things to say. And you also call Surrey customers, and they've had nothing but good things to say. So again, they're pretty equal. I just thought we need to have a change and just see how this goes. And if I'm wrong, I'll be the first to tell you I was wrong. We should have stayed with Surrey. And that gives us a year to try it. And if we don't feel like we're getting the things that we are looking for, then we can always make a different recommendation next year. But that's my proposal and recommendation, is to award the property and liability insurance bid to the Association of County Commissioners risk pool.
Never had any problems with Surrey?
The only problem, and I'll let Chris, if you don't mind, speak about it. Just, we can't really talk about it. There's one issue where I'll try to do it so that you're not. So one issue we're having is when you're trying to settle a claim, sometimes the companies we have now, the liabilities we pay for the insurance, but then they may or may not want to settle. And so sometimes that becomes a problem for the county. We feel like if we were with the association and we were in a similar situation where a company, they don't want to settle, it'd be the risk pool. Of course, they would want to help the county. I don't feel like that's always the case for outside companies, outside insurance, because the money is it's their money. And the risk pool is all the county's money pooled together. So I think that's a risk that's one thing that kind of tipped me over to the association was because that can happen. When we don't have anything, there's nothing, we have no control over these carriers. But we feel like the association would be a, more of an advocate, I guess you'd say. But we haven't had any, I would not say any real problems with Surrey. I mean, I think every year going to always have problems. I mean, we're going to have problems with the association. None of them are going to be perfect. But there's not any like glaring problems, no. Not that I'm aware of. If anybody else?
Paula, did you say risk pool covers all the low areas?
We were gonna have to go with another company for that, for the flood coverage. None of them, a lot of these companies wouldn't cover them. Is that right, isn't it Safety National?
One of the providers would not cover certain properties that were particularly flood prone, including the general services building. So that one was kicked out. But no, the two options that were finally decided upon, they both covered all properties.
And I guess that's another thing, that we threw out several of the other options, but these two are just really tit for tat. Like, there's really not that much difference that we could find between the risk pool or stay on Surrey.
Well, Commissioner McCoy, I recommend we go with the risk pool simply because.
And I was just gonna say, really, I think the main difference I saw between the pool and going to Surrey regarding flood insurance is, but both of them will cover all of our properties, so that's fine. There's just a little bit different in coverages, so there are special, well, the pool calls it special risk zone, and then Surrey calls them, there's certain zones. And so, I know with Surrey, they had a longer list of what's in their zone X of properties. That gets a little bit less coverage, but the deductible is a little bit smaller. And you got the pool, which has a little bit less coverage, but the list is very short. I think you're talking 7, 8 property, in that range, 7, 8 properties, higher deductible, but they're all covered. And so looking at the two, there's not really not necessarily one's better than the other, it's just a little bit different, but at the end of the day, what we're looking for is make sure all the properties are covered. And so I don't think we go wrong with either one. That was just really, we want to talk about the difference in the flood coverage. The flood coverage within it, but everything else, I think we're well protected and very close.
Well, another question, with the climate the way it is, are either one of these, maybe risk pool cover riots, loot or damage to some of our buildings, and we're getting into hurricane season that cover hurricane damage?
So obviously storms and hurricanes, all that is covered. As for riots and
I don't think you're gonna find coverage for
I
that.
think that's a little bit
I
different.
think a lot of businesses are having that issue where it's
Yeah,
not covered.
it's not
legally,
covered.
So I'm not sure that's really provided.
And what I can say about weather, because I know this question's come up, I don't know if you thought about with going with the pool, and we want some clarification that we got back from the pool as well, is if there's a catastrophic event in North Carolina, I mean, a major hurricane, would it deplete the funds of the pool, because all their clients are just North Carolina clients as compared to a national insurance company. The pool got back to us with that. Essentially, they've never had, with all the hurricanes we've been through a number since '86. They've never had an issue, and they've never had to increase rates or have assessments to pay into to make up for any of those losses. They've been financially stable, so that helped calm our fears at all. If there was a major hurricane that took out eastern North Carolina, it's never been a problem. We had 2 100-year floods in the span of 2 years, and the pool was fine. They didn't have to issue any assessments or anything like that. So.
Let me, just Commissioner Springle, I had a chance to look at some of this information, and one of the things you're going to find is that very few insurance companies are going to cover everything. So by having multiple companies that do specific things are going to be extremely important, because they can do it better than somebody that's going to try to cover all of it. My only concern was when I looked at the liability, particularly when I looked at what they were trying to do as far as covering liability or excess liability. An umbrella policy, nobody wanted to quote anything more than $4 million. would you give me $5 million worth of coverage? And I called Jim Bergen yesterday, he said he has a pretty large insurance agency, just to find out what the market is. The market that's out there can provide you a lot more coverage. He has one client that has $15 million worth of umbrella coverage, and so that may be something we need to look at from an umbrella standpoint, mainly because in our discussions we've seen, what liability limits some counties are facing when they have a claim, where this, not saying anybody's right or wrong, I'm just saying that's the climate that we're in today. I would just hate for the county to be in a position where they're having to take money out of their fund balance just to pay a liability claim. So my suggestion would be to look at some of these other companies that offer an umbrella policy where they have to work with the association or whatever they have to do to be able to provide the coverage. He told me that he had several companies that he would recommend that we contact that would offer this, and usually the premium is based on the deductible that you're willing to pay, of course. The higher deductible, the lower the premium. For example, the $15 million policy, for example, the deductible was only $10,000. I mean, you're paying $10,000, they're going to pay the rest of it. So that was my concern when I talked to Chris to start with, and just kind of got some of this stuff started, was I was just concerned because our discussions have been, where are we going to be down the road if someone were to file a claim against the county for a lot more than the liability limits that we've got. And we don't need to be in that position. We don't need to put our citizens in that position either. We're taking money out of our tax money to be able to pay for a claim that somebody has decided to file against the county. So as far as the other coverages that I looked at, and I'm definitely not an expert, I just was in the business for a while, and I'm a little bit familiar with what the coverages are. Looking at what we can do through the association and through these other companies that offer very specific coverages is the best way to do it. You're not going to find somebody's going to do it all. And the other thing that I mentioned to Paula was oftentimes you have a company that's been working with you for a long time. They get very complacent as far as providing service. They're just looking for the premium that you're paying in. They're not looking at satisfying the client. And so I think by going to another company, it's going to get everybody's attention, say, okay, these people are willing to change. We need to do some things to do better and offer some services that maybe we haven't been offering. Even though the services were probably available, they just didn't offer it to us. So, and the training aspect of loss control is extremely important. And we, as our county, as spread out as our county is, we don't need to have a situation like we've had in the past. We had one situation, where we had a building that got flooded and had no insurance. That's not good. So I think by reviewing what we have and what we're going is the best route. Maybe my suggestion is the best route to go.
And we had engaged Commissioner Springle before we even did this whole process because his former employment was with an insurance company, and that was just so that we could get a little bit of information on what to ask for and those kind of things.
I didn't know the companies or anything.
Yeah, we didn't let him know who. I sent him a document and redacted all the names, so he didn't know who was comparing against who, to keep it very fair. So he wouldn't know anything different than you knew today as far as what we're discussing, the company names.
Any more questions? So as it stands now, of course, you're recommending we go with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners risk pool, but I still like what Commissioner Springle said, that we look at also an umbrella policy separate from that, because it's very little cost compared.
We agree. We'll go back and see if we can add that as another option to the, like you said, to our group of carriers.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is, while you're there, County Manager Report.
Okay. Thank you. First, we'll go over the regular meeting agenda review. You should have it in front of you. Most of the things on here are I'll just start with item D under consent. It's going to be the Harnett Regional Water adoption of their fiscal year 21 capital improvement plan. Item E is Harnett Regional Water adoption of their water and sewer ordinance. We do that every year as well. F are the Harnett Regional Water write-offs for the fourth quarter. G is Emergency Services request approval of the fireworks application for the Anderson Creek Club for July 4th celebration. H, Emergency Services request approval of the fireworks application for, why is that on there twice? Oh, Anderson Creek Club, I'm sorry, and then there's one for Carolina Lakes, sorry. Anderson Creek Club and then one for Carolina Lakes on July 4th as well. Thank you. Facilities Maintenance request approval of award of bid and contract to Martin Edwards and Associates of Linden for the demolition of the old cafeteria, storage building, and fuel tanks at the old Ben Haven property. And we'll have an update on that shortly for you. The Health Director requests approval of a revised clinical patient fees, eligibility, and bad write-off policy. Item K, Harnett Regional Water requests approval of resolution adopting the 2019 local water supply plan for Harnett Regional Water System. Item L, the Tax Department requests approval of a service contract with Vincent Valuations for new construction, appraisal, data collection, and data entry. Land pricing, and what we're going to do on that is still under review right now. We are freezing several positions in tax to fund that for next year. So instead of hiring appraisers, we're going to contract it out for a period of time to get everything caught up. Item M, JCPC requests approval of the public safety program agreements for the following, and it lists Harnett County Restitution, 4-H Teen Court, re-entry, School Kid Empower, Extended Learning, Lifeguard Instruction and Development, Take Two Academy, and JCPC Administration. Item N are the changes that Brian spoke to you about in the pay plan ordinance.
That one will be number 12, I think.
Oh, we're gonna move it to,
Make it
oh, that's right.
Since it's amending an ordinance.
That's right.
It'll, I think, be number 12.
Okay. Item O is going to be the approval of the award of bid. And the reason it wasn't on here, I really didn't make a decision until last night. So I didn't know who I was going to be recommending this morning. So that's why that's blank. So it'll be the NCACC risk pool. And then P is the resolution changing the meeting location. This is if you want to open back up to the public for the July 6th meeting. Do you want to have that here and not open to the public, or do you want to have it and have it somewhere larger, such as the Commons area? That was what we wanted to talk about today. Are you ready to open back up, or do you want to wait a little while?
Well, based on the numbers that Ashley sent us over the weekend, we had a major increase in confirmed, and we had more deaths. So our numbers are not going the right direction. That's just my,
Well, we can continue this. We'll just take that off.
but
and
that's
do
up
it.
to the all five
That-
of us. I'm just saying I was
Whatever. I mean,
concerned when I saw the
what do y'all?
increase.
What's the pleasure of the board? And we'll either leave this on, or we'll move it to a later time.
Just when y'all change your meetings or change your locations, it's best if we can do a resolution, ahead of time.
Do we have to do it today?
You don't.
No, it would be on the 15th meeting, and we also down on the agenda listed COVID update and discussion of reopening county buildings, and it could be there. We would just have to prepare it if you were gonna change locations, and even if you were in the Commons area, there still has to be distancing, so it's not, you still limit the number of people that can be in that room. Like we can do 10 or 11 in here, that room's bigger, but I don't know if you have the fire marshal at the door and you stop it at so many if we had that many, or how that goes.
Well, and the question is, how many do we have? Most of the time, we've got 5, and that's a large crowd.
Yeah.
And we're 15 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart, so there's, if you want to, I can't see them flooding in here.
I can't see getting 15 in here proper.
Yeah.
I know we're a little bit apart, but somebody rolls in their chair and then I'm in Kimberly's space. So we could squeeze it, move the chairs out, but still, if you let 3 people in, and there was a 4th one at the door that we didn't allow in for this room.
Let's just think about it.
Okay,
the
we'll
next
take it
meeting.
off and we'll discuss it at that meeting. We'll discuss it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe we need to wait and see where the numbers are going, and where the numbers are going here in Harnett County too.
Okay. And item 7 is the resolution by the Harnett County Board of Commissioners to preserve and defend the right to peacefully assemble and to condemn acts of violence and looting. And you have a copy of that at your place, and I think Gene also emailed it to you.
Yeah.
And then item 8 would be the public hearing on the proposed resolution of the Harnett County Board of Commissioners to relocate boundary lines between the fire protection districts, and Rodney spoke to you about that last time. And then item 9, the Harnett County Finance Officer requests approval of the Irwin Elementary School amended capital project ordinance that we discussed today. Number 10 would be the bond resolution for Irwin Elementary School. 11 would be approval of the fiscal year 2021 budget ordinance and budget. And then, okay, and then we talked about the resolution for opening county buildings back up, and that's all I've got for the 15th. The next thing, I believe, are the appointments. I didn't know if y'all wanted to, have you got the list of appointments? Oh, okay, do you have, I have one.
Then what have I done?
I don't know.
Hold on, let me make a copy.
That's not the right agenda item number, but I think that's the one. So there are some appointments, I just wanted y'all to review them before we put them forth for approval. So a couple of other things I wanted to mention, and then I'll turn it back over to Brian to give you an update on Ben Haven. I wanted to mention that I'm going to be on vacation the week of June 29th. I'm actually going to go to the beach. We'll see how that goes. So I'll be out that week. You do have a work session on that Tuesday, but Coley and Brian should be able to handle anything that we've got. I feel comfortable with that. I will be available by phone if you need me. I don't plan to do too much work with the laptop. And then I also wanted to mention the Veteran Services sent us a report. I forwarded it to y'all, but I just wanted to say it publicly today because I thought it was really a good report. So according to the Department of Veterans Affairs, Harnett County now has 15,172 veterans in Harnett County. And that puts us number 10 in the state as the 10th most veterans county. So I just thought that was important that we've moved up on the list. When Eric Truesdale came in 1996 and I came that same year, there were 6,500 vets. So we've had a 43% increase in the number of vets in Harnett County. And the total expenditure is $173 million. So that is an increase of 245 vets, an increase of over 29 million for this year. So we were pleased with that report, and I did send it to you. But I just wanted to say it at the meeting today. And then Gina just passed out the appointments needed for, there's several. The East Regional Housing Authority, Historic Properties Commission, Nursing Home Community Advisory Committee, and the Social Services Board.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
On this housing authority, what does that do? Because I don't see anything in Harnett County when it comes to.
Right. Yolanda Massey has been on, she was our appointee for a number of years because she worked for the health department. Well, she's changed jobs now, so she's no longer in Harnett County. So that's why we had requested to put Barry Blevins on this committee, because we have not been as engaged as we would like to be. And with him, I mean, now we've always tried to have a county person on it. And we feel like with Barry doing the CDBG grants and different things, it might be a good idea to have somebody like that on this so that we could try to bring the housing authority at least back into Harnett County rather than it being served out of Sanford. So that is one of the reasons that he applied. But we haven't, Yolanda would go to the meetings. The problem is with ours being in Sanford again, that years ago when it got relinquished to Sanford, that's been a problem. And we know it, but it's really hard to undo it. And Yolanda worked really hard for us. I'll have to tell you, I've talked to her quite often, and Dunn had some issues with getting some reimbursements back, and she would speak up at these meetings, and I think Dunn finally, it took several years, but they got the money back that they were owed. So I think, you know, it'll be important that we do have somebody that will work for Harnett County's needs on that East Regional. I don't know exactly what that geographic footprint is for that Eastern Carolina. I don't know how many counties are in it, but we'll try to find that out.
10.
Oh, there's 10. Okay,
They
10.
represent 10 counties.
Another question.
Mhm.
On this last one, the Southeast Economic Development Commission, is that not the board, Price?
You just had him appointed as a minority representative.
Right.
Right, they need a private sector representative, so we still need one more vacancy, there's one more vacancy just for anybody.
And Mr. Elmore had served on that separate from being a commissioner. So it's like a business representative or somebody, you know,
Okay.
out in
I
the
got
community.
you. Just ask some questions.
This one is the one that meets down at Dublin?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's all I have, and I'll turn it over to Brian to give you an update on Ben Haven.
Well, let me mention one thing. On the Social Services Board, we're looking for a person in the western part of the county to serve on the Social Services Board. If you know somebody, just call Paul and let him know that this person might be interested. Steve McNeil was on it for years, and then we had a lady that was assistant principal, retired assistant principal, Melissa, I can't think of her last name anyway. She got cancer and wasn't able to do it, so we don't have a representative from the western part of the county. So we need somebody on
Yeah,
that board.
Melissa Martin.
Yeah, right. She got cancer and was not able to continue, so, and this is a position that has to be approved by the state, so, we'd have to get the application to the state and get them to approve it. It's not something we approve in this particular position.
Okay.
Brian?
One more time from me. We thought that the upcoming meeting with the addition of the contract for demolition of the cafeteria at the former Ben Haven Elementary campus provided a good opportunity to get back in front of you and give you an update on kind of where this project is and what's happened since the last time we talked about it. First, I want to thank Chris Johnson with Facilities. He's the project manager for this campus project, and he's been out there probably just about every day since the county acquired this property, replacing windows if they've been busted out, or managing some of the process for revitalizing this facility. The county, as you know, acquired this property in October of 2019 from the Harnett County Board of Education. And the first thing that we did was condition all of the buildings to prevent further any deterioration to the campus. We conducted an assessment of the property with multiple county departments who would be departments that would have a presence at this campus. And the focus since that time, since we got everything conditioned, has really been on the gymnasium and the attached classrooms. Harnett County Schools has expressed a desire to locate an early college on the site, and Parks and Recreation would like to open up the former gymnasium to the public as well as the ball fields on the campus. So in March of this year, we installed new bar units on the gymnasium and the attached classrooms, and installed new bathroom partitions in the restrooms. In April of this year, we demolished old heating pipes and radiators, old cabinets and data wires from this facility. Then in May of this year, Gina, if you want to pull up, that's the gymnasium. You can see it's got quite a bit of dust in it, but it'll be cleaned out. The walls have been repainted. That's one of the classrooms. So in May of this year, we primed and painted the interior of the classrooms, corridor, entrance to the gymnasium, and touched up the red paint in the gym. That is the entrance to the gymnasium. We also installed a drop ceiling and flat panel LED lights in the front entrance of the gymnasium. Then in June, so far in June of this year, new VCT tile has been installed in the gymnasium entrance, the classrooms, and the corridor. That is ongoing. And some leaking water heaters and bad faucets have been replaced in the restrooms, as well as new supply lines added to provide hot water to the sinks. So we're getting very close to being able to reopen this facility once that's allowed per rules to the public. And the next steps, you can see the demolition of the former cafeteria building. And once this is demolished, we will begin design of a parking lot for the site, which will really open it up and allow it to be used going forward. We've also obtained cost estimates for new windows in the gymnasium and the classroom, for new blinds to go in there, and for exterior painting and some other items. So that is kind of where things stand at this point. As you know, over the last probably more than 6 months now, we've had meetings with community groups for all of these former campuses. And once the budget is approved by the board, our goal is to send emails out to the email lists that we've obtained to give them updates on where these projects stand. Obviously, with the revenue shortfalls that are projected, there may not be a lot of ability to move a great deal forward on the projects, but, you know, obviously the goal of us, of what we're doing, is to preserve and maintain these facilities so that when we are ready with funding appropriated through the capital plan, it won't cost a lot more than it does now in terms of that. Any questions? Thank y'all very much.
And if you ever want to go out there, just let us know, because Chris is out there basically every day, and it looks really good. They're doing it, it really looks nice.
I think you're doing a great job considering the time frame that you've been working on it. So I just said, commend you.
Do we have need for a closed session, Mr. Attorney? He's going to be my favorite county attorney. Nothing personal there, Chris, but I think it's about 3 meetings in a row with no closed session, so it may be a record. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Have a second by Commissioner Johnson, and a motion by Commissioner Miller. I guess there's no discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. It was unanimous for those who can't see us, so we are adjourned.